Hello, hello. Happy Monday. I'm excited to bring to you this week's edition of Mind Shift Monday. Today, we're talking about releasing the guilt and shame and embracing grace instead. You hear me talk about this a lot, but we're talking also about releasing the stinking thinking. With the guilt and shame comes with stinking thinking. You've heard that probably so many times in your life. But what that means is there's certain things that have happened in our life that has caused our hearts to rise up and to do whatever it takes to keep us safe. And oftentimes part of that process is that we embrace, like, oh, we have to be perfect, we have to, the things people have spoken over us, right? The things we've spoken over ourselves become the way that we think, and the way that we're looking at our journey. Oh, it needs to be perfect. I'm not doing this, I need to be doing that. All the things that come with that inner critic, which I call the stinking thinking, that negativity that we allow, that thought comes to our head. Now we begin to roll with it, and we begin to let in that negativity, that inner critic, that stinking thinking. And now the things we think become our actions, and those actions become our life. And also often so it's working against us instead of for us. We want to have a renewed mind where we, instead of blaming and shaming our heart for the things it didn't do, the things that should have been this way, should have, would have, could have, how different would life be if we started to recognize and pay attention? Wait, that voice doesn't sound very loving. Is that me, or is that another voice? Is that something someone spoke over me? Is that a lie that I'm believing? All those questions to ask yourself are really, really important. But the first step to really overcoming that stinking thinking and the inner critic, and just really pounding on ourselves and blaming and shaming our heart, is to recognize, to start to pay attention to those thoughts, pay attention to what we're hearing, and how especially we're talking even to ourselves. That's really, really important, that we are coming to that self-awareness. Okay, so as you begin to start to notice the way you look in the mirror, you get a glimpse of yourself and go, oh man, look at you, you gained way too much, you just look awful. I used to do that to myself. But we all probably can resonate with that one. Or we might think, why did you do that? That was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why did you say that? That just doesn't make any sense. Or that was just stupid. That is stupid. What are you doing? You are stupid. I don't know what words you hear to yourself, but let's giving some examples of things I used to speak to myself. And the first step is awareness. Are we aware of how we're speaking to ourselves? Are we aware of that inner critic, or that voice that we're hearing that's not positive, that's really hammering on us? Are we shaming and blaming our heart? Because I want to propose to you for a moment that your heart is doing an incredible job keeping you safe. If you're using food as a means of comfort, if you're trying to make everything perfect, your intention really is a good intention, but we could be pounding on our heart saying, what's wrong with you? Why can't you do what you have all the head knowledge, but you can't make it. You're not doing it. You're doing the opposite of what you know to do. It's that push-pull struggle, right? And we start to shame our heart and blame our heart. I want to propose today that we take a first step to just going, heart, I'm so sorry for the things I've spoken over you. Body, I'm sorry for the things I've spoken over you. That I'm going to release that stinking thinking today, that I'm going to release forgiveness, releasing that guilt and shame that I put on my heart and body. Will you forgive me for the times I've spoken these things over you? Or maybe you want to come out of alignment with the words that were spoken over you by somebody else. Even it could be yourself, or somebody else spoke these things. So it's a good time to grab a journal, grab a piece of paper and a pen, start to write out what's landing in your heart right here. Does that resonate with you? What would it look like if we started to come into the awareness of the way we're speaking to ourselves, or the words that we're allowing to stay? So again, could be something someone spoke over you many years ago, your spouse, significant other, family member, good friend spoke over you, a mentor spoke over you that may have not been very positive, and now you hear that in your head. So I want you to take a moment today just to think about, how are you speaking to yourself? Start to pay attention. Let it come into awareness. Is that self-critic, that stinking thinking, is that really very prominent in your thoughts, and now it's ruling your actions? Take a moment to let that come into awareness. And I want to give you the idea of, what if you just release that today? You release the guilt, release the shame. There's no shame and blame in what your heart is choosing to not do what you know to do, but doing what feels good, because there's a good reason for that. It's doing what it's designed to do, to get you through the hard stuff. But what if we started to notice the way we're speaking to ourselves? And as soon as that negative thought comes in, we stop it in its tracks and go, nope, I'm not going to come into alignment and agreement with that anymore. I renounce those words I spoke over myself. I forgive myself for the times when I didn't do it perfectly, because my journey's never going to look perfect. That's the reality. It's never going to look perfect. It's always going to be the good, the not so good, the great choices, the not so great choices. That's life, you guys. That's just what life's about. No one's going to have a perfect journey. But when we start to release that stinking thinking, that inner critic that's just pounding ourselves over the head, and start to embrace, oh, heart, you really want the whole bag of Oreos right now. What if we just had two? What if we had like a Lily's peanut butter cup instead of the actual peanut butter cup? Does it taste exactly the same? No, but maybe it might be a good enough substitution that your heart might actually be okay with. What if we did that instead? Instead of shaming and blaming and kicking ourselves in the butt and punching ourselves in the face, what if we began to release that stinking thinking, which becomes our actions, and start to embrace, oh man, I hear you. Thank you for having a voice. I get it. But we have survived all those crazy things. That's not our life anymore. What if we began to take those steps and go, oh, and if you're a spiritual person, ask God, how do you see me? What's one thing about me you want me to know that you love about me? And we start to look at ourselves in a different light. We're not always having that constant pounding of ourselves, that inner critic that's just beating us up. And a lot of times it's ourselves, but guys, sometimes it's the things that were spoken over us. So release the guilt and shame. If that's been you, there's no guilt and shame here. This is a no bully zone. We want to release that. You can even use your words and the power of your testimony, the words of your powerful voice, to say, I renounce my agreement with every negative word I've ever spoken over myself or anybody else spoke over me. I renounce my agreement with that. If you're a spiritual person, I send that to Jesus's feet. I just say, go now. And I release forgiveness. And I ask my heart and my body to forgive me for the times I've come into agreement with that. And I am embracing grace. I get to have grace for myself. I get to give myself grace, because my journey is never going to look perfect. And that's okay. It's not supposed to be. I accept and embrace grace for myself. Even in the difficult times when I may not make the best choice for myself, I understand why that's happening. And I'm going to work through it. And I'm not trying to be perfect. Maybe you had 2 Oreos instead of the whole bag of Oreos. That's still a win. We're going to learn to embrace grace and start to be aware of the actual wins that we're having and celebrating every single one. And we're starting to let go of that stinking thinking, so that we're able to walk in our true identity and walk into the fullness of joy. You have to ask yourself, this is one question you can ask yourself when you have a thought, whatever that thought may be. Ask yourself, does that thought bring me joy? And does that thought feel loving? Or does that thought hurt my heart? Does that feel unloving? And does that take my joy away? That you want to look at that and that thing. Is it bringing me joy, or is it stealing my joy? If it's stealing your joy, then I would reckon to say that's stinking thinking. If it does not feel loving, that's definitely not from our loving God. I would release those thoughts and that stinking thinking, and I would embrace, okay, what's the opposite of what I'm feeling right now? Because oftentimes we can move that opposite spirit and embrace the joy and the grace that we get to receive. No more of it embracing what steals our joy. And if you're a spiritual person like me, we know Nehemiah 8:10 says that the joy of the Lord is our strength. When we have joy, it gives him joy, and his joy is what gives us the strength we need to keep pressing forward. So I don't know if this resonates with you. Let me know how this lands with your heart. But this is my mind shift for today, is releasing the stinking thinking and embracing grace instead, chasing after joy. Why can't you have the joy? Who said you have to live in the lack of joy? We were designed and created to live in joy. That's a fruit of the Spirit that we get to experience every single day, every moment of every day. And that's something we don't own. We're renewing our mind to step into that. But this is the first step to that stinking thinking. Does it bring me joy? And does it feel loving? Ask those 2 questions to yourself when a thought comes in. We can't always control the thoughts that come in, but we 100% can control whether we let those thoughts stay there. But the first step is awareness. Are you bring that into your awareness. Ooh, that doesn't feel very loving. Oh man, I'm so sorry. I released that guilt and shame. I released that negative stinking thinking, and I embrace grace, and I'm going to choose joy. What brings me joy in this thought, in this circumstance? So I bless you with that. Have an amazing rest of your day. Love to hear how this lands for you. And if this blesses you, would you share it? Because there's someone out there that else needs to hear this too. Have an amazing rest of your night. Bless you. Bye-bye.